morning, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Gastrointestinal Knowledge with Dr. Cohn. This morning, I would like to begin our lecture with a Proverbs. This is Proverbs 23:12. Apply your mind to instruction and your ear to the words of knowledge. Proverbs has a great deal to say about learning and knowledge, keeping ourselves mentally alert. I would encourage you to read one chapter of Proverbs a day. It's very instructional. So let's begin. Today I want to go over the small intestine and the large intestine. So let's look here at the small intestine. Remember that the small intestine is made up of three parts, from the stomach to the ileocecal valve. So from the pyloric valve to the ileocecal valve. The first section is called the duodenum. You may also pronounce it duodenum if you would like. The second part is the jejunum, and the last part is the ileum. And this is ileum, I-L-E-U-M. The part of your pelvic girdle is ileum, I-L-I-M. Americans can't pronounce the difference between E and I on that. So let's look here at the gross anatomy. So this is the major organ of digestion and absorption. In fact, nutrients, the vast majority of nutrients and water will be absorbed in the small intestine, and the large intestine will absorb what's left over and make feces. It's about 12-13 feet long. It depends on the size of the person. And it goes from the pyloric sphincter at the stomach to the ileocecal valve. Ileo means ileum. Cecal is talking about the cecum. And it's at this valve where the small intestine joins with the large intestine. It's called the small intestine because it has a small diameter. The large intestine has the large diameter. So let's look at this picture, and we see the duodenum, the jejunum, and the ileum on the left side, and then on the right side it points out the pyloric sphincter and then the ileocecal valve. When we look here at the small intestine, in the duodenum, which is that first part of the small intestine, this is where bile and the pancreatic juices, including all the enzymes, will join together and then dump into the duodenum. And this is going to be very close to the pyloric valve so that the acidic chyme coming out of the stomach will mix with the highly alkaline, remember it's a pH of 8, highly alkaline pancreatic juice, and turn that pH of the chyme from being acidic to being neutral. Why is it important that the chyme be a neutral pH in the small intestines? Think about that. You're right. It is so that the pancreatic and brush border enzymes have the proper pH in which to work. It's their optimal pH. Good job. All right. So the superior mesenteric artery is going to bring oxygenated blood to the tissues of the small intestine. And then, of course, the veins, we remember, drain into the hepatic portal system and go into the liver. The nerve supply, we have the parasympathetic innervation, which is brought to us by the vagus nerve. Remember, the vagus nerve is going to serve the heart, it's going to serve the stomach, It's going to serve the intestines. And then the sympathetic innervation is from what's called the thoracic splanchnic nerves. So all along the small intestine, there are lots and lots of modifications. There are circular folds, there are villi, and there are microvilli. And this is going to increase the surface area of the small intestine immensely. Notice it says the size of a tennis court. It's amazing. And this is so that maximum absorption of nutrients, waters, electrolytes, whatever, can take place. The circular folds are going to allow the chyme to move slowly, and that allows for nutrient absorption as well as digestion. The villi have a core that contains the capillary and lymphatic vessels. And remember, the lymphatic vessel is called a lacteal. Lacteal. What gets absorbed into the lymph system? Think. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, you're right. Fats, lipids. Woohoo! Everything else goes into the circulatory system. And then the microvilli are going to contain the brush border enzymes. The brush border enzymes. And these are the enzymes that are going to break down disaccharides, dipeptides into their monomers so that they can be absorbed into the bloodstream. It's also here that we don't talk about it very much, but there are some nucleases that will break down the DNA RNA polymers into monomers or dimonomers so it can be absorbed into the blood and go to the liver via the hepatic portal system. So, oh, look, here's a pretty picture showing the circular folds, right? The villi, and then you have the little, on top of the little bitty things right here are microvilli. So the big one is the villus, and the little bitty ones are the microvilli. And you can see that, you can see here the circulatory system, capillaries, etc., going up into the villi. Here's an up-close picture of a villus, and please pay attention to the intestinal crypt, all right, the lacteal, and then you can identify the capillaries. And then down below, what we have are called duodenal glands in the submucosa. So as we look at these, note those. Note the little green blobs are the lymphoid tissues, Peyer's patches. And then at the tippy top, each individual cell has microvilli. Each individual cell has microvilli. And because it looks really fuzzy under the microscope, and also because of the mucus and because of the presence of enzymes, it's often called the brush border. The brush border. So the brush border is made up of microvilli. Microvilli make up the brush border. And it's here where we have the final steps of digestion. So what are the 5 main types of cells that are found in the villi and the intestinal crypts? These are the enterocytes, that makes up the epithelium, simple columnar epithelium. And what we're going to see is their job is to absorb nutrients and electrolytes. And the crypts produce the intestinal juice, which is a very thin mixture of mucus. It helps the chyme kind of go along. We have goblet cells, and remember goblet cells, no matter where they're found, they're in the epithelium, and they secrete mucus. Then we have the enteroendocrine cells that produce CCK and secretin. They're found within the villi and some in the crypts. We have the Paneth cells that are found in very deep or toward the bottom of the crypts, and they're going to secrete antimicrobial agents, so antimicrobial proteins. And then we have stem cells, and stem cells, of course, are those that are going to reproduce. They're going to differentiate into any of the other cell types. I think it's fascinating that the epithelium of the villus is renewed at least once every 4 days. Think about your stomach epithelium being renewed about once a week, and your villus epithelium renewed about once to every 4 days. And so that is a lot of work that your body is doing. Remember that in the small intestine we have the Peyer's patches, and this is for our immune response. Mainly it secretes IgA. This is why the polio vaccine is given orally, is because the polio virus attacks the system through the small intestine, and if our Peyer's patches get stimulated by the vaccine, the B cells and plasma cells that are in the Peyer's patches will secrete IgA and prevent the polio virus from entering into the being absorbed into the vasculature. Remember the submucosa? This is where the duodenal glands are, and they secrete an alkaline mucus to help neutralize the acidity of the chyme. So you've got a lot of alkaline properties in the small intestine, some from the pancreas. The bile is a little alkaline, and the alkaline mucus from the duodenal glands. This all helps neutralize the acidic pH of the chyme. All right. So why do people who have cancer and in chemotherapy or radiation therapy get so sick? And it's because especially the chemotherapy is not specific. It targets all rapidly dividing cells. So any cell in your body that divides rapidly, your immune system cells, your epithelial cells, no matter where your epithelial cells are, these all divide rapidly, and chemotherapy is going to kill them. Because the only way we know to kill cancer cells is to utilize the fact that they undergo mitosis so rapidly we can inhibit that. So you figure your stomach lining is dying and you have those toxins released from those cells. Your small intestine and large intestine epithelial cells are being killed off, and you've got toxins released from that. And so, yeah, they're going to be really, really sick. This would be a good time to pause and to look over your notes and make sure that you have everything you need. So just hit the pause button and go back over the slides. Make sure you've got everything you need. Draw a line under your notes and label this section intestinal juice. Your gut, this is just amazing, secretes up to 2 liters of intestinal juice a day. Wow, that's amazing. What stimulates this is hypertonic or acidic chyme. And remember that the intestinal juice is alkaline and isotonic with the blood plasma, so it's slightly alkaline for the gut and it's isotonic with the blood plasma. It's mainly water, but it contains mucus. And remember that the mucus is secreted by the duodenal cells and the goblet cells. The duodenal cells and the goblet cells. So good test question. The source of mucus in the small intestine comes from two places. Name those two places. That's right, the duodenal glands and the goblet cells. So when we look here, it takes about 3 to 6 hours in the small intestine to absorb all the nutrients in the water that comes with the chyme. And what we see is that there needs to be more digestion. So from the stomach and the mouth, you have partially digested carbs and proteins and fats. And so the small intestine has to finish that up. It has to break down those polymers into monomers so that they can be ingested, not ingested, sorry, so they can be absorbed. So the brush border enzymes are bound to the plasma membrane and they do the final digestion. When we look at this, we have to see how the chyme, remember, is only going to be introduced from the stomach into the intestine in small amounts. And so it has to mix with the bile and the pancreatic juice to bring that acidic pH up to more toward neutral, so that the enzymes in the small intestine are at the right pH to be able to do their job. The enterogastric reflex and the enterogastrones, or if you prefer, the gut hormones, control the movement of food and make sure that the small intestine doesn't get overwhelmed. So after you eat, you have segmentation, as the chyme is going to mix and move the contents. The small intestine mix and moves the chyme, and it's going to move it toward the ileocecal valve. And the intensity of mixing is going to be altered by the long reflex, the short reflex, and hormones. So the parasympathetic system increases motility. Parasympathetic increases motility. The sympathetic decreases motility. The sympathetic decreases motility. Get that straight. Parasympathetic increases motility. Sympathetic decreases motility. Peristalsis is going to continue. It's going to move everything toward the large intestine, and it is going to be regulated by a hormone called motilin. Motilin is going to regulate motility. Motilin regulates motility. One more time. Motilin regulates motility. Got that? So the trip from the duodenum to the ileum takes about 2 hours. About 2 hours. Review peristalsis and segmentation and make sure that you know how they're different. Remember, segmentation, primary mixes food, breaks it down mechanically, and moves it forwards and backwards. Remember that peristalsis is primarily going to move the food forward. Maybe a little mixing, but that's mainly segmentation. Segmentation mixes and peristalsis moves forward. So utilize these tables to help you get everything organized. So when we look at the stomach, gastric motility and emptying, all right? That's going to be a stimulus on the small intestine. So it's going to increase motility in the ileum and relaxation of the ileocecal valve. And what's the mechanism? These are long neural reflexes and gastrin. Distension of the small intestine all right, uh, is uh, going to increase the strength of segmentation, and this is going to be regulated by the long and the short-term neural reflexes. Whenever your small intestine is empty, it initiates peristalsis, and we'll repeat that until the next meal. Motilin then is going to initiate long and short neural reflexes to move things along. So take time. You might want to pause here and read through this table, looking at the overview of the gastrointestinal organs, the mouth and its accessory organs, the pharynx, the esophagus, the stomach. Make sure you know their major functions. Make sure you know their major functions. Here's the second half, looking at the small intestine and the large intestine. Once again, know the organ, its accessory organs, and their major function. Their major function. So this is a good time to pause and go back and review the organs that we've covered so far. Go back and review that table. All right, welcome back. Draw a line in your notes and label this section the large intestine. And we're going to talk about the large intestine. How you make poop. So, 3 things you need to remember about the large intestine so you can tell it apart from the small intestine and everything else. It has the tenea coli. So these are longitudinal smooth muscles in the muscularis. Coli means in the colon. The hostra, and these are sacs that are caused by the muscles. And then the epiploic appendages. Wow. Epiploic appendages. Fat-filled pouches of visceral peritoneum. Why do we need fat? A for energy, B for protection. So let's look at the pieces parts. When the small intestine joins the large intestine, it's at the ileocecal valve, and that's in the part of the large intestine that is inferior to that ileocecal valve is called the cecum. The cecum. It's a blind-ended pouch, and at the end of that pouch is the appendix. For many, many decades, millennia, whatever, we thought, oh, the appendix didn't do anything except get infected and cause problems. But in small children especially, is extremely important in building up their overall immune response. It's part of the mucus-associated lymphatic tissue of the immune system. It also stores bacteria that can recolonize the gut. You know, if you ever have antibiotic-associated diarrhea, everybody says eat yogurt with live cultures. That's very good advice. But also, the appendix is going to start spitting out your gut bacteria to help recolonize it. And because it has a twisted shape, it can get blocked. And then when it gets blocked, then is when we start having problems with inflammation, appendicitis. Sometimes, if it's caught early, a physician will try to treat it with antibiotics, but most of the time, you just gotta take it out. Surgery. The colon then has three major subdivisions. All right. The ascending colon, so it goes up. It turns, and the turn is called the right colonic flexure. You might see it as hepatic because it's right there by the liver, but I call it the right colonic flexure. And then you have the transverse colon, which goes all the way across the abdominal cavity. It's going to make another turn, and that's called the left colic flexure, the left colic flexure. Sometimes it's called the splenic flexure because it turns right there by the spleen. It's kind of like, turn right on one street or turn right at the McDonald's, whatever. Okay, the descending colon then is going to descend to the sigmoid colon, and it's called sigmoid because it has an S shape. The sigmoid colon then becomes the rectum, and the rectum has three valves. And this is really, really important because this way when you pass gas, flatus or flatus, then you don't poop in your pants at the same time. Unlike, my little nephews and my niece, their little valves aren't strong enough yet, so every time they pass gas, they poop. And every time they poop, they pass gas. It's very stinky little people. In the anal canal, this is the very last segment, opens to the external environment, and that opening is called the anus. The anus. So the opening, the superior opening of the gastrointestinal system is your mouth. And the inferior opening of the gastrointestinal system is the anus. The anus has two sphincters that are very important. The internal anal sphincter, which is smooth muscle and is not under your control. And then the external anal sphincter, which is skeletal muscle, and it is under your control. This is why you can hold your poop until you get to the bathroom. Lovely picture. So here's the appendix. You can look down here at the bottom left hand. You have the appendix, which is a finger like a projection. You have the cecum, the ileocecal valve, the ascending, the right colic or colic flexure, the transverse colon, the left colic, you can call it colic flexure, comes down the descending colon into the sigmoid colon, into the rectum, through the anal canal, and bloop, out the anus and into the toilet bowl. When we look inside at the anus, the anal canal, you can see the rectum valve, the rectum, the anal canal. Look at these veins. They're called the hemorrhoidal veins because when they distend, they give us hemorrhoids. Not fun. You have the internal anal sphincter, which remember is going to be smooth muscle, and the external anal sphincter, which is then going to be, skeletal muscle. You can control the external sphincter. You cannot control the internal sphincter. Just keep that in mind. What are some of the diseases? We've talked about appendicitis. So this can lead to ischemia, necrosis. If it's ruptured, it can cause peritonitis. Usually people will say that they have pain in the lower right quadrant, and they have loss of appetite. You can see nausea and vomiting. or some people just have simple pain. But the only thing you can do, oops, but the only thing you can do is take it out. So, what's the microscopic anatomy? Okay, it has a thicker mucosa. It's made up of simple columnar epithelium, except in the anal canal where it's stratified squamous epithelium. Why is it stratified squamous epithelium? Because there's a lot of roughage and a lot of abrasion that takes place when you defecate, and you need that extra layer of protection. It doesn't contain the circular folds, the villi, or the digestive secretions. So the large intestine does not have those. It does have what we call deep crypts, and those are filled with goblet cells. And of course, what do goblet cells do? They secrete what? Mucus. Good job. Good job. So now is the time to pause, draw a line, go back and check your notes, and make sure you know what's going on. Let's talk about the bacteria that live in your gut. There are over 1,000 different types of bacteria, and gut microbiology is a fairly new field in the last 10 to 12 years that has taken off like crazy. We finally have the technology to understand what's taking place in the gut with the bacteria. And the gut bacteria seem to have some control over our moods, uh, our general overall well-being, whether it be physical, physiological, emotional, psychological. It's pretty fascinating, but it's pretty amazing. They're amazing. Their main metabolic function is fermentation, and they ferment carbohydrates that we can't digest. And of course, this is cellulose. That's what we call fiber. Because it's not digestible, it helps our body move things along so we don't get constipated. We have regular bowel movements. However, the little bacteria that can kind of break that cellulose down a little bit, when they ferment, guess what they do? They produce gas. So about half a liter a day of gas. So if you've got a 2-liter bottle of Coke or some kind of soda, about a fourth of that volume is the gas you produce every day. Some people produce a little bit more, some people a little bit less, and depending on what's being broken down, you can get really, really stinky gas. The bacteria also synthesize different B complexes and vitamin K, and this goes to the liver. It's really important that we make sure that we don't get a lot of pathogenic bacteria, and the fact that we have so many different bacteria in our gut, they just basically outcompete the pathogenic bacteria. So we can have antibiotic-associated diarrhea where the antibiotic is so strong it kills everything. A lot of time when that happens, we see that a normal bacterium called Clostridium difficile excuse me, begins to overpopulate, and then this can cause what's called pseudomembranous colitis, which is inflammation of the colon. And this can cause perforation of the colon, bacteria that leak out into the peritoneum. This causes sepsis. Major problem. Okay, draw a line. Take a break. Let's start with the digestive processes in the large intestine. So our food stays in our large intestine anywhere from 12 to 14 hours. So you're looking at, if it's 12 hours and it's 3 in the gut, 3 to 4 in the stomach, uh, you're looking at about 18 hours at the least for the time you eat something until your body gets rid of it. Um, Remember that in the large intestine, only the bacteria are going to digest anything. Vitamins are going to be made. Water, electrolytes, especially sodium and chloride, will be absorbed from the chyme that's going through into the blood. So basically, the large intestine is going to dehydrate the chyme and make feces, and then the feces, once it gets to the anus, will send a signal to the brain that says, poop, guts to go. I know it says large intestine is important for our comfort, but it's not essential for life. Yeah, well, that's very, very new. If the colon's removed, the end of the ileum can be brought out through the side of the abdominal wall. It's called an ileostomy. Ostomy means an opening or hole, and then collect the chyme into a bag, and you have to change out the bag. All right, so what causes the movement of the large intestine? Well, the haustra will contract, and that's going to move things along. And then we have the gastrocolic or the gastrocolic reflex, and this results in big movements. You know, every now and then you feel in your gut this really big movement. It's almost like a cramp, and that is your large intestine moving things along. Okay. So some of the problems with the large intestine, if you don't eat enough fiber, then you put increased pressure on the wall, and that can result in herniations of the mucosa. They look like little outpocketings. These are called diverticula, and the problem with diverticula is that stuff can get stuck in there and cause what we call diverticulitis, inflammation of the diverticula. If they become inflamed enough, they can rupture and leak into the peritoneum, and that causes peritonitis, which eventually gets into the bloodstream, and then we have bacteremia, sepsis, and it will kill you. You ready to learn about how to go poop? Okay. Think about this next time you're sitting on the throne. So once most of the fluid has been reabsorbed and the feces becomes solid, then this is going to distend the colon, and it's going to cause the colon to contract. And this is due to the defecation reflex in the spine. So these are parasympathetic signals, and it stimulates the contraction of the sigmoid colon and the rectum. It relaxes the internal anal sphincter, and then you have conscious control over your external anus sphincter, and so that pressure of the feces pushing down on the external anal sphincter sends a message to your brain that says, we need to poop, find a bathroom quick. And you can say okay and go find a bathroom, or you can say, I'm busy right now, just hang on. But usually you can't hang on too long. But you can make the choice. So once you make the choice, you relax the rectum, and sometimes you need to push and sometimes you don't. But the push is called the Valsalva's maneuver. Valsalva's maneuver. And this is when you grit your teeth, the glottis closes, and you contract the diaphragm and abdominal wall muscles and push to get that poop out. If you have to do that, you might want to consider eating more fiber. Oh. So here's a lovely picture of the 3 steps of how to poop. I'll let you look at that in your own time. But you stop and think, this is a spinal reflex. So what happens if the spine is severed or damaged and your gut doesn't get the spinal reflex? Think about that. That might be a good test question. I think that would make a very good test question. What are some of the diseases, pathologies we see? Well, diarrhea. No fun. This is when the large intestine doesn't absorb the water, and it could be due to many different things. Could be caused by the bacteria, could be caused by antibiotics, it could be caused by drinking way too much water, and there's just not enough time for the large intestine to absorb the water, and so everything goes through really fast. 2 groups of patients are going to have major problems with diarrhea. That's small children, so babies to about 4 or 5, and then our elderly, because what happens is they will dehydrate very, very quickly. And with dehydration, then you have electrolyte imbalances. And so the ratio of sodium, potassium, and chloride are off. And if that takes place, then you're going to start seeing heart problems. If the pH is off, you have acidosis. And of course, if the body's too acidic, then the enzymes can't do their jobs and you die. The first thing we're going to see in dealing with acidosis is the respiratory reflex. And then if it's prolonged, the kidneys will jump in. So go back and review the respiratory reflexes as they deal with acidosis and alkalosis. Acidosis and alkalosis. Constipation is the other side of the problem. Oh, this is when you don't drink enough water or too much water is absorbed. A lot of times this is also due to a complete lack of fiber. And all you do is eat pizza or hamburgers and you don't eat your vegetables. Please eat your vegetables. And if you need to, go get some fiber at the store and mix it with water and down it so that you have sufficient fiber so you can go poop. The problem with constipation is if the feces gets too large, it will tear the anus and even up to the anal canal. It'll tear it open so it can pass, and then all that pressure from pushing will distend the hemorrhoidal veins to cause hemorrhoids. Yeesh. Don't do that.